In today's fast-paced, hyper-connected world, the phenomenon of people losing interest quickly has become increasingly common, almost normalized. From relationships and careers to hobbies, goals, and even personal dreams, modern individuals often begin with intense enthusiasm only to abandon their pursuits shortly afterward. Psychology explains this behavior not as laziness or lack of character, but as a complex interaction between brain chemistry, emotional conditioning, social influence, and environmental overstimulation. One of the primary psychological reasons people lose interest so fast lies in the brain's reward system, particularly the role of dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter responsible for motivation, pleasure, and anticipation of reward. When a person starts something new, whether it's a relationship, a business idea, or a creative project, the brain releases dopamine in high amounts. This creates excitement, focus, and a sense of purpose. However, dopamine is not designed to remain consistently high. Once novelty fades, dopamine levels drop, and with that drop comes boredom, restlessness, and emotional disengagement. Many people mistakenly interpret this natural chemical decline as a sign that they have chosen the wrong path, rather than understanding it as a normal psychological phase that requires discipline and emotional regulation to overcome. Another major psychological factor is the overstimulation of choice in modern society. Humans were not evolutionarily designed to process endless options. Yet today, people are constantly exposed to alternative possibilities, better jobs, better partners, better lifestyles, through social media, advertising, and digital platforms. This constant exposure creates what psychologists call choice overload and grass is greener syndrome. When individuals believe something better is always available, commitment becomes difficult. The mind stays in a state of comparison rather than presence. As a result, interest. This pattern is particularly damaging because it trains the brain to value novelty over depth, excitement over meaning, and short-term pleasure over long-term fulfillment. Emotional avoidance is another powerful psychological reason behind rapidly losing interest. Many individuals unconsciously use boredom or loss of interest as a defense mechanism. When something begins to demand emotional effort, vulnerability, or responsibility, the mind may retreat by labeling the experience as boring or not worth it. This is especially common in relationships. At the beginning, emotional distance allows excitement to flourish without risk. But as intimacy grows, unresolved fears, such as fear of rejection, abandonment, or loss of control, surface. Instead of confronting these fears, the brain seeks escape by shutting down interest. Psychology refers to this as avoidant coping behavior, where disengagement becomes a protective response to emotional discomfort. In such cases, the issue is not the activity or relationship itself, but the individual's inability to tolerate emotional depth. Modern attention fragmentation also plays a critical role. The human attention span has significantly decreased due to constant exposure to notifications, short videos, and instant gratification. The brain becomes conditioned to rapid stimulation and immediate rewards. Activities that require patience, consistency, or delayed gratification, such as learning a skill, building a career, or nurturing relationships, start to feel overwhelming or dull. From a neurological perspective, the prefrontal cortex, which governs focus and self-control, becomes weaker with excessive multitasking and digital consumption. Meanwhile, the brain's impulsive systems grow stronger. This imbalance makes sustained interest psychologically exhausting. People don't lose interest because they lack passion. They lose interest because their mental stamina has been eroded by overstimulation. Identity confusion further intensifies this problem. Many people pursue goals not because they align with their core values, but because of social pressure, trends, or external validation. When a goal is not internally meaningful, motivation is shallow. Initially, EXT. Understanding why people lose interest so fast is only the first step. The deeper psychological question is how this pattern reshapes personality, relationships, and long-term life outcomes. When individuals repeatedly disengage from goals, relationships, or ambitions, the brain adapts to this behavior. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself, means that habits of quitting become neurologically reinforced over time. Each time a person abandons something prematurely, the brain strengthens the neural pathway that associates discomfort or boredom with withdrawal. Eventually, perseverance itself begins to feel unnatural. This creates a self-fulfilling psychological loop where individuals genuinely believe they are incapable of long-term focus, when in reality, their brain has simply adapted to avoidance. One of the most damaging consequences of rapid loss of interest is its impact on self-trust. Psychology emphasizes that confidence is not built through success alone, but through keeping promises to oneself. When people repeatedly quit, they unconsciously weaken their belief in their own reliability. This erosion of self-trust leads to hesitation, overthinking, and chronic dissatisfaction. Even when opportunities arise, the individual doubts their ability to follow through. This internal conflict creates emotional fatigue, making it even harder to stay engaged. Over time, life begins to feel fragmented, filled with unfinished chapters rather than coherent progress. In relationships, losing interest quickly often leads to shallow emotional bonds. Psychological attachment theory explains that healthy relationships require emotional regulation, communication, and tolerance of discomfort. When individuals equate love or connection solely with excitement, they abandon relationships during inevitable phases of emotional neutrality or conflict. This creates a cycle of short-lived connections that never reach emotional depth. People may confuse intensity with intimacy, mistaking emotional highs for genuine compatibility. As a result, loneliness persists despite frequent social interaction. Psychology shows that deep fulfillment comes not from constant stimulation, but from emotional security and shared growth professionally. Rapid disinterest limits career development and mastery. Skill acquisition requires repetition, failure, and persistence, processes that are inherently uncomfortable. Individuals who lose interest quickly often remain stuck at beginner levels across multiple fields. This creates the illusion of versatility while masking a lack of depth. From a psychological perspective, mastery brings long-term satisfaction because it aligns effort with identity. When people never stay long enough to develop competence, work becomes a source of frustration rather than purpose. This can lead to chronic job hopping, burnout, and a persistent sense of underachievement. Social comparison further accelerates this cycle. Observing other success stories, especially through curated online narratives, can make one's own journey feel slow or meaningless. Psychology identifies this as upward social comparison, which often leads to decreased motivation rather than inspiration. When people believe they are behind, they may disengage entirely as a form of emotional self-protection. Losing interest becomes a way to escape feelings of inadequacy. Unfortunately, this avoidance prevents growth, reinforcing the very insecurities that caused disengagement in the first place. The psychology of meaning offers a powerful contrast to the psychology of interest. Interest is often emotional and temporary, while meaning is cognitive and enduring. Viktor Frankl, a prominent psychologist, argued that humans can endure great difficulty if they find meaning in it. When people rely solely on interest to sustain action, they become emotionally dependent on motivation. But when actions are guided by values, purpose, and responsibility, engagement becomes resolute. Meaning transforms discomfort into growth and boredom into discipline. Psychology consistently shows that people who anchor their lives in meaning are less likely to abandon their commitments when emotions fluctuate. Another overlooked factor is emotional literacy. Many people lose interest simply because they misinterpret their internal states. Boredom, fatigue, or temporary dissatisfaction are often mislabeled as loss of passion. Psychology teaches that emotions are transient signals, not commands. Without emotional awareness, individuals react impulsively rather than reflectively. Learning to sit with discomfort, analyze emotional patterns, and differentiate between emotional states and long-term values is a crucial psychological skill. Those who develop this skill are far more capable of sustaining interest over time. Breaking the cycle of rapid disinterest requires intentional psychological reconditioning. This includes reducing overstimulation, setting realistic expectations, and practicing delayed gratification. Small commitments followed through consistently rebuild self-trust and strengthen focus. Psychology emphasizes the importance of identity-based habits. seeing oneself as a committed person rather than relying on motivation. When identity shifts, behavior follows. Instead of asking, "Am I interested?" the question becomes, "Is this aligned with who I want to become?" This cognitive shift transforms engagement from emotional dependency to conscious choice. Ultimately, losing interest quickly is not a personal flaw, but a reflection of modern psychological conditioning. However, awareness creates responsibility. When individuals understand the mechanisms behind their disengagement, they gain the power to change them. Psychology does not promise constant excitement, but it offers something far more valuable: depth, meaning, and lasting fulfillment. Those who learn to stay, through boredom, discomfort, and doubt, discover that true satisfaction.